My mom used to make up stories to tell me about a group of ducks. I think they were a trio of brothers who traveled through time, solving mysteries. Duck detectives with a time machine. But wherever they went in history, whatever wild encounters they had with dinosaurs or aliens, the duck stories always started the same way. Every morning, these ducks would wake up and eat waffles. A world of infinite possibilities, a time machine, and the endless wonder of new mysteries, and the routine predictability of finitude, the visceral comfort of waffles in the morning. As long as civilization remains intact enough to keep digital records, which it's not something I take for granted very far into the future, but assuming it does, we are living through a moment that I think will be understood by future historians as the beginning of recorded history. Many of us submit daily or weekly to adding a deposit to the vast and ever-growing expanse of digitally recorded life. Sermons and songs, birthday messages and YouTube rants, TikTok dances and Twitter feeds, even the simple act of searching Google adds to the cacophony of recorded data. Never before have we recorded data anywhere near this quantity. Never before has so much human life, from extraordinary public events to mundane everyday moments, been recorded in photo and video, stored in the cloud for prosperity. And we're also recording life from more vantage points than ever before. Still a vast gulf between those living in places with ubiquitous smartphones and those who may never access the internet in their lives, yet still so many more people than ever before able to record their own stories, their own perspective, making a history that could be told by the many instead of the few. So I consider myself a digital native, but when I was growing up, like all of you, I assume, we still, well, maybe not you, Jake, we took photos on film, right? It was expensive to buy and develop the film, well, expensive relative to the limitless digital photos I take these days. And I remember my enchantment with taking beautiful places, pictures of beautiful places as a child, wanting to capture the wow moments that I had exploring Yosemite with my family in the summertime. And my mom discouraging me from taking those shots without people in them. Did your parents discourage you from taking these beautiful shots without? Yeah, because you can always buy a postcard with an image like that. The point of taking a picture is to take the people that you're with. And now, with my unlimited digital camera, I take all the people-less nature shots that I want. And by and large, I never look at them again. So I think sometimes about the idea that people from indigenous cultures were or are unwilling to allow themselves to be photographed, because the act might cause some spiritual damage, steal a soul, capture some part of one's spirit in the photograph. And I understand there's some scholarly debate over the history and underlying meaning of these beliefs, but when a group picture is being painstakingly orchestrated that I'm supposed to be in, and I'm being told to smile and I just don't feel like it, well, I think it's hard not to at least give a little credence the possibility that this technology is sapping my spirit. And now I think about what the ubiquitous digital records of everything means for our spirits, the way that knowing I can find a digital copy of any photograph I've ever taken, a digital photograph of any place ever photographed, means I don't have any printed photos. Or the way it's become less important to learn anything in particular because whatever information we seek is just a few keystrokes away. the way that infinite possibility can keep us always distracted, that infinite possibility can keep us always distracted, can somehow, like the stolen soul, suck some of the life out of this finite moment. My colleague, Reverend Peter Friedrichs, shared this reflection in a sermon on photographs and their relationship to our personal histories. So I wanted to share it with you. Pictures, he said, photos, videos, they're a funny thing. They capture an event, but not the reality of the event itself, not our personal experience of it or the meaning we give to it. It's notoriously true that four people standing on four corners of an intersection can witness the same accident and will tell four different stories of what happened, right? The same is true, he says, for our photographs. We each bring our own perspectives, histories, and experiences to the event that's captured there. And because of this, he says, photographs can be tricky, even dangerous too, because the stories that grow up around them may not be of our own making. We can become trapped by them. Take, for example, the home movie his father took of his sister trying to back up their garden tractor with a trailer attached to it. He says, everyone knows that backing up a trailer is tricky. And as a 12-year-old, Nancy had to learn that the hard way, and it's preserved on film for all of us to witness. To the rest of the family, it's a hilarious silent movie of her repeated attempts and repeated failures until she literally throws her hands up in the air and stomps off in a fit of frustration. But to my sister, he writes, these images capture an embarrassing incident that I'm guessing undermined her self-confidence and echoed in her psyche for years, maybe even to this day. If we're not careful, we can be defined by the images captured on video or in photos and the stories we and others tell about them. And so I put that next to this idea that fascinates me, that people in a few hundred or 1,000 years from now might still have access to digital technology, that they won't have to imagine what our lives looked like the way we have to imagine from writing and art, the archaeological scraps left behind, what life was like hundreds or thousands of years ago. And yet, the deeper meaning of our lives, how we see ourselves, how the arc of an important relationship twists and turns through a lifetime, how it felt when that photo of a child leaving home was taken, what it means that a favorite uncle wasn't there when we swung the phone around to send him a message that Thanksgiving. The depth and richness of our inner lives, the reaches of the subterranean cave systems which house our deepest selves, will never show up in a photo or a video. The infinite ability to capture recording of our lives turns out to remain largely in the finite world of surface reality, glossing over the infinite realm within. So this is the question I'm wrestling with. How do we hold the infinite reaches of history? So much that we're aware of, going back 14 billion years, extending out who knows how long. How do we hold the infinite reaches of history in our little finite lives? How can the infinite expanse of our inner lives be held in the finite confines of history? How do we make sense of this paradox that we live in, at once being both on the cusp of the infinite, the dawn of a new millennium, the beginning of recorded history, a universe of possibility awaiting us, and also held with such clear constraints in the immediacy of the finite, in the single grain of rice of our own lifetime? One place that I've found an invitation to reflecting on time in what I feel like is a spacious way is the art of Andy Goldsworthy. Walking along his wood line in the Presidio, the giant tree trunks, some of you have been there, I'm sure, the giant tree trunks laid in a curving path along the ground. A whole other history is revealed through these giant trees than the measly 250 years preserved in the buildings that remember time since the European empires arrived at that place. Or watching him diligently construct sculpture, an elaborate rock egg, or an intricate web of branches, only to watch it swept away by wave or wind moments later. And so I was struck, reflecting on his work, by these words of his, this reflection on holding the infinite and finite together. He said, "Time, confined into blind caves or extended through tunnels, time, confined into blind caves or extended through tunnels, responds to the call of infinity, which teases with its promise of freedom. Outside the body, time is a pair of compasses at the hands of eternity." Outside the body, time is a pair of compasses at the hands of eternity. But inside, it is a pendulum fastened to the heart. The heart takes its measure from the lengthening swing of the pendulum, surveying what time is left. In its own rhythm, time spreads itself wildly here and there and is crippled elsewhere. Its unequally distributed weight wounds my body. That is how the particularities of my life are manifest. I'm not going to try and say much more about that. But if you want to, watch Rivers and Tides or dwell in Andy Goldsworthy's and then have a conversation about it, please let me know. But what it called to mind, strangely enough for me, is Joseph. Joseph, who, the dreamer from the Bible, right? This son of Jacob, the youngest of 12 sons, whose life spans a great deal of the story, in fact, if you take this moment that I want to share with you, from the time the Israelites leave to go to Egypt all the way until they return. Because what happens is Jacob, he's sold into slavery by his siblings. It's a rough story, as many of those old stories are. Sold into slavery, and then eventually forgives them and welcomes them into his home in Egypt. And he's quite prosperous there. But he has a prophecy before he dies. Because he's got these dreams, remember? And so he prophesizes before he dies that the people must take his bones back to Israel with them when they return. And so it's generations later in the story of Moses, generations and generations, time, the infinite and the finite. Moses, it says, took the bones of Joseph with him. For Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here. And I wonder about what it means to be carrying bones. I've shared with you what I understand as the salvific message that I found in our tradition in Unitarian Universalism as a 17-year-old returning from college, returning home from an inpatient psychiatric unit, feeling like a failure, struggling with mental health, struggling with the pain of the world, what I found was a community that told me with so much more than words. Many of you have heard me say this, so much more than words. You are loved. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, or what you say, or what you think, or how you feel, you are loved. At the root of it all, there is a love holding you. These are bones. These are the bones of Hosea Ballou, the early Universalist circuit rider who proclaimed God's universal love. Our religious tradition has been carrying those bones for over 200 years now. But I doubt you'll find any 17-year-old who gets the experience of being loved by reading Ballou's A Treatise on Atonement. Or anyone of any age, really. And we'll talk more about all the other bones. We have some really rich bones we carry. We'll talk about some more about that next week. But my religious community had brought those bones to life, had given them flesh, made them real for me today. And so I know we must care for the bones that we've been given. Joseph's bones and Joseph's promise would never have made it to Moses, but for years of religious people doing the work of remembering and passing down a legacy from generation to generation. So, whose bones do you carry? Whose precious bones do we carry? I make up some similar stories to the one that my mom told me. Some similar stories for Henry these days. And based on the strange happenstance of improvisational moments, his stories revolve around chickadees instead of ducks, though they still love to solve mysteries. They don't have a time machine, but they do live in an enchanted forest where a princess's pet octopus can take them on a ride to the land of the dead, and their pal Agent X calls in a rocket ship if they ever need to get off the planet. And the three little chickadees, well, every morning they wake up and go downstairs for breakfast, porridge, of course. And every time they solve a mystery, they have a party to celebrate. And after a recent story involving skeletons and pumpkins and marigolds and a party where the chickadees and their friends feasted on pan de muerto, Henry knew it was time to build an altar. So we made our ofrenda for Dia de los Muertos, and I was a little embarrassed to realize that I couldn't go pull out any photographs of our beloved dead for the altar. Luckily, a trip to Grandma's easily remedied the situation. And when it was all assembled, candles and marigolds and photographs, people Henry's barely heard anything about yet. The satisfaction gleamed in his eyes. A simple ritual holding the vast gulf between finite and infinite, between an average Tuesday evening smashed between days of schools with all the immediacy of bedtime, and a timeless connection to ancestors, a glowing orange glimpse of eternity, a place in our home offering to hold us with its fleeting reminder to hold us in our place in time. And may it be so for us all, and blessed be.